Representation of mental health in media is very hit or miss. On one hand, you can have a character that, while not stated to be mentally ill, you can see that they are troubled and handle their demons in their own way, showing either a bleak or hopeful image of someone that, while not being real themselves, is going through something very much real. Or it can be dog shit. So I want to talk about an example of mental illness being shown in a positive light, and also a character that thousands of people have connected with. Today, I'm taking a look at Madeline from Celeste. I've been going back and forth on how to handle this since the topic of mental health is not something I take lightly. But I think I managed to find a balance between talking about Madeline as a character, her mental illness, and how it affects her. Now, enough with preambles. What's Madeline's backstory? Well, we don't get much of one. What we do know is that Madeline is a normal, everyday girl. One day she felt like she was in a rut, and decided to challenge herself by climbing up Mount Celeste. Other than that, we know that she had a relationship that didn't pan out for factors that we don't really know, but I'll speculate on it a bit. That's all we get, and frankly, in this instance, I can see why. Madeline is meant to be relatable to the average young adult, so us not seeing much of her past is so we can put ourselves in her shoes. So, how is her personality? She is rather reserved. She takes time to open up to others, and we see that she is rather antisocial, getting mad when people tease her, and also she spends her time arguing with people online. I know at least 10 people that are exactly like that, so yeah, I'd say that she's very realistic. But she isn't always a bitch, thankfully. Once you get to know her, she's actually pretty chill. A bit snarky, but still. I like that we see that under all that moodiness and sass, she's an alright person, and even fun to hang out with. There's also, we'll get back to this in a bit. Overall, I'd say that Madeline is a wonderful character. Her personality and way of interacting with people is not only realistic, but something that I myself have seen firsthand with a lot of my friends. Easily one of the best female protagonists I've ever seen in a video game. So depression, am I right? Yeah, you knew I was gonna talk about it. Madeline has depression, and the whole game is about her learning to cope with and live with it. The fact that you climb a mountain isn't a coincidence, folks. It's symbolic and ties to the narrative. So, what is depression? I know that sounds like a very stupid question to ask, but you'd be surprised how many people don't know how to describe what it is. Depression is a mood disorder that causes a persisting feeling of sadness and loss of interest. Also called major depressive disorder or clinical depression, it affects how you feel, think, or behave, and it can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems. There. That wasn't so hard, was it? Obviously, there is more to depression than that description I gave. For example, it can also create a sense of hopelessness, a sense of dissatisfaction with your surroundings, or hell, complete and utter apathy towards everything. Depression affects everyone differently, since mental illness isn't just a checklist of things you feel and do. It's a spectrum that may afflict you or others in different ways. You can have a room full of people with depression, but their outlook and symptoms will be different from each other's. One thing I want to preface is that while I myself am not a mental health professional, mental illness should not be romanticized or glorified. It's a genuine issue many go through, so seeing it being portrayed in very poor taste is abhorrent. Yes, mental illness can make a character more interesting, but if you're going to show that, you better hope to treat it like the ailment it is, and not like some accessory to your plot or to be quirky. Otherwise, you're adding into a cycle of misinformation, and that fucking sucks. Now, I want to show a few examples of Madeline being a good example for people with depression, since, thankfully, her character doesn't begin and end with her illness. I'm only showing a handful since I do want people to go out and play this game. It's a phenomenal experience and one of my favorite games out there. Madeline has a few panic attacks in the game, and it shows people both helping her and ignoring her. This is the reason I theorize her partner broke up with her. They were probably overwhelmed by her calling them in the middle of the night to calm her down. As someone who had a partner who used to do that to me a lot, yeah, it can be rough. Meanwhile, in another instance, Theo, the coolest motherfucker to ever walk the earth, helps Madeline relax when she's having a panic attack by teaching her a technique that he always uses to calm down. Her interaction with the owner of the resort. In Chapter 3, we get introduced to Mr. Oshiro, the owner of the Celestial Resort. He's very neurotic and, honestly, very absent-minded. He asks Madeline to help clean the resort for any future guests. Madeline, being a very polite girl, says that she'll help him out, but it turns out that this place is very dangerous. Theo tries to get Madeline to realize that she's kind of being taken advantage of, but she refuses to listen, saying that she just wants to help Mr. Oshiro. But once things get too heavy, Madeline, who I will expand upon in a moment, tells off Mr. Oshiro and he doesn't take it really well. He loses control and chases Madeline out of the resort. Okay, that was a lot. But basically where I'm going with this is that Madeline was willing to help someone else with their problems. But in doing so, she endangered herself because of her low level of agency in telling people off due to her depression. That happens a lot. It can be hard to tell off someone when they're being unfair to you, because you want to be a good person. You want to be the one who helps people for once, but sometimes you have to know when to pick who to aid with their battles. It's hard, but sometimes it's best to just let them go so they can figure themselves out. Her not having a cell phone could be a recommendation by a professional. It's been shown that being too close to your phone can cause sleep problems and augment any other mental issues you may have. Her constantly pushing people away. It's been shown that whenever Madeline has a crisis, she stops contacting people or acts in a way that makes people not want to talk to her. I appreciate this toxic trait being shown since I do that a lot. And it shows that people deal with issues in ways that aren't necessarily healthy, and it can alienate those around them, building up walls and not allowing people to help you when you really need it most. Her relationship with Madeline. Okay, now I get to talk about her. Consider this a 2-for-1 analysis. Madeline is the personification of Madeline's doubts and fears, as well as a version of herself with her more toxic traits being amplified. That's why, while Madeline can be rather snarky and grumpy, Madeline is just a bitch. Though a bitch that looks after Madeline in her own way. You see, Madeline is that part of Madeline that tries to protect her, who tries to get her off the mountain since, as she puts it, they aren't mountain climbers. Everyone has that voice inside of them. The voice that tells you,
"Don't do this. This is not good for you."
And while that voice can be helpful, it can also prevent you from experiencing new things. Stop you from doing the thing that will change your life for the better. So, in essence, Madeline isn't an evil version of Madeline. She's the side of Madeline who is afraid to reach out for help, who is afraid to take risks, and the side who wants to push people away. While at first Madeline saw her as an anchor weighing her down, she came to accept Madeline as a part of herself that she needs to move forward, tying into the message of learning how to live with those mental blocks instead of letting them control you or trying to get rid of them. You should find your own way to keep them under control and live better for it. It's very hard to let go of certain things, but with support, you can reach new heights. Madeline is one of the most complex characters I will analyze in this series. Outside of her mental illness, she remains a character that shows that you can persevere and achieve your goals, regardless of whatever is holding you down. She's also trans. You might be wondering why I didn't bring that up at all in the analysis. Well, because she is a character who has a lot more stuff going on other than being trans. I will use the last bit of this video to say the following. A character doesn't begin and end with a single trait of who they are. It's everything that composites them that makes them relatable and/or understandable. Focusing on just one aspect does them a disservice, and it shows how shallow you are when analyzing media. Also, this goes without saying, but fuck transphobes. But, since I brought this up, I want to say that I absolutely love Madeline, without being trans myself. And I think that the fact that so many trans folks connected with her and her struggles is fantastic. Hell, there is people out there who didn't even know she was trans and still loved her and her story. That shows to me that she's a phenomenal character, that she goes beyond sexual orientation, gender, nationality, race, and whatever other thing we humans use as an excuse to be assholes to each other. Struggle is universal, but so is the drive to be better. Madeline is a troubled woman with a lot of healing to go through. But she shows us that, as long as you surround yourself with folks that love you and care for you, as long as you look after yourself, and as long as you stay true to yourself, that everything will be okay.